Kirtland was rising, until its own success began destroying it. They built a temple. Their community was growing. Their future looked secure. Then the money disappeared. A financial experiment failed. Friends became enemies. And Joseph Smith fled into the darkness. So how did a movement on the rise end up fleeing the very city where it hoped to build its future? In the 1830s, Kirtland, Ohio, became a major center of the young Latter-day Saint movement as converts arrived, businesses expanded, and the Kirtland Temple was completed in 1836. But beneath this rapid growth, the community was becoming increasingly dependent on land, credit, and debt. When the American economy collapsed, Kirtland's financial troubles became a crisis of trust and leadership, threatening the future of the movement itself. Chapter 1. The city they tried to build. By 1836, Kirtland had changed dramatically. The transformation was visible everywhere. More homes appeared. More businesses opened. More converts arrived with the expectation that this was where the movement's future was being built. At the center of it stood the Kirtland Temple. For the saints who had sacrificed to construct it, the building represented more than stone, timber, and labor. It represented permanence. It suggested that this growing community could establish itself and endure. But permanence required money. The movement needed land for new arrivals. Families needed farms. Businesses needed capital. And the church needed resources to support an expanding community whose needs were growing faster than its financial security. Church leaders therefore became increasingly involved in economic development. The goal was not simply to survive from one season to the next. The community needed an economic foundation strong enough to support its religious ambitions. One of the boldest experiments came in 1836. The Kirtland Safety Society was created as a financial institution intended to help support the community's economic growth. Its organizers hoped the institution would provide credit, encourage commerce, and help the developing settlement acquire the resources it needed. But the plan immediately encountered a serious obstacle. Ohio authorities did not grant it a formal banking charter. That meant the organization could not simply operate as a conventional state-chartered bank. Its organizers reorganized it as the Kirtland Safety Society Anti-Banking Company. The name itself reflected the unusual position in which the institution now operated. It issued notes. People invested. And confidence grew around the idea that the new institution could help strengthen the community. For a young settlement trying to expand, that promise mattered. But the timing was becoming dangerous. Across the United States, financial conditions were deteriorating. Speculation had pushed prices upward, credit had expanded, and confidence in banks and paper money was beginning to weaken. Kirtland's experiment was therefore being built at precisely the moment when the wider American financial system was becoming unstable. The community could not see the full danger yet, but the clock was already running. And then the entire American economy began to crack. Chapter 2. When the money disappeared. In 1837, the United States entered a devastating financial crisis. The Panic of 1837 spread through a country already weakened by years of speculation, easy credit, and financial instability. Banks suspended payments. Businesses failed. Credit became harder to obtain. And investments that had once seemed secure suddenly looked very different. Communities far from the nation's financial centers felt the shock. Kirtland was not spared. The Kirtland Safety Society came under severe pressure. The institution was already vulnerable because it lacked a formal state banking charter. Now the wider financial crisis was undermining confidence in paper notes and financial institutions across the country. Its paper notes lost value. Some investors suffered substantial losses. For families who had committed money to the institution, the consequences could be immediate and personal. Savings could disappear. Debts could become harder to meet. And promises of economic security could suddenly feel like liabilities. But the deepest damage was not measured in dollars. It was measured in trust. Joseph Smith and other church leaders had supported the institution. Now critics began questioning their judgment. If the financial experiment had failed, what did that mean about the men who had promoted it? That question cut deeper because Joseph Smith's authority was not merely administrative. For believers, his leadership was connected to his prophetic claims. So financial failure could become a spiritual crisis. Some members began to question his decisions. Others questioned his revelations. And some eventually rejected his leadership altogether. The disagreement became personal. People who had once worshipped together were now arguing over money, authority, and the future of the movement. The community that had gathered around a common faith was beginning to fracture from within. And the people challenging Joseph Smith were not simply outsiders. Some were former allies, some were prominent members, and some were leaders within the movement itself. The question was no longer whether Kirtland could recover financially. It was whether the movement could survive its own internal rebellion. This documentary is based on historical records and widely accepted scholarship. While some dates, details, and interpretations may vary between sources, the events presented here reflect the established historical record. Chapter 3: The Revolt Inside. The financial crisis had changed the balance of power. Joseph Smith's authority was being challenged openly. The dispute was no longer confined to financial arguments. It was becoming a struggle over leadership itself. Former supporters became critics. Accusations multiplied, and disagreements over finances became intertwined with deeper questions about prophecy and leadership. For some dissenters, the failure of the Safety Society raised questions about whether Joseph Smith's financial decisions could be trusted. For others, the issue went further. They questioned whether his prophetic authority could survive such a serious failure. The result was a growing divide inside the community. The conflict reached the highest levels of the movement. Some members abandoned the church. Others demanded changes, and loyalists feared that the opposition could become violent. The hostility was becoming personal and, at times, threatening. Brigham Young, one of Joseph Smith's leading supporters, was among those caught in the turmoil. He defended Joseph Smith's leadership while opposition inside Kirtland continued to intensify. The dispute was now affecting relationships that had once held the community together. Friends became opponents. Former allies found themselves on opposite sides, and every new accusation made reconciliation more difficult. The situation was no longer simply about a failed financial institution. It was about who would control the future of the movement. Meanwhile, legal problems were mounting. Joseph Smith faced lawsuits connected to financial obligations. The disputes created the possibility of arrest and added another layer of danger to an already unstable situation. Now the pressure was coming from both directions. Inside the church, dissent was growing. Outside it, legal consequences were becoming harder to ignore. Joseph Smith and his supporters had to consider not only how to preserve their authority, but how to remain physically safe. The situation was moving beyond argument, and then the danger became immediate. Chapter 4: The Night Kirtland Changed Forever. On January 12, 1838, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon left Kirtland. They traveled on horseback during the night. Their departure came after months of financial controversy, internal conflict, legal disputes, and threats. The circumstances were serious enough that remaining in Kirtland had become increasingly dangerous for the two leaders. Behind them was the community that had once seemed destined to become the movement's permanent center. Kirtland had witnessed the construction of the temple. It had attracted converts from across the United States. It had become a place where the young church organized its institutions and developed its religious identity. Now that center was losing its position, but they were not simply escaping an economic failure. They were leaving amid legal disputes, threats, and bitter internal conflict. Their departure also revealed something larger. The movement's geographic future was changing. The Latter-day Saints had already established communities in Missouri, and church leaders increasingly focused their attention there. The West was becoming more than a distant destination. It was becoming the next stage of the movement's survival. Their departure marked a dramatic turning point. But Kirtland did not empty overnight. Many Latter-day Saints remained behind. Some continued living in the area. Others would leave gradually as circumstances changed. The movement was therefore not disappearing from Ohio in a single dramatic evacuation. Instead, its center was shifting piece by piece. The destination was Missouri, where the church had already established an important presence. The movement's future was no longer centered on Ohio, and the journey west was about to become a defining chapter in Mormon history. Chapter 5: The Exodus. The departure from Kirtland continued beyond Joseph Smith's flight. The months that followed turned an individual departure into a broader movement of people. Families began making difficult decisions. Should they remain near homes and property they had worked to establish? Or should they leave for a future they could not predict? In 1838, groups of Latter-day Saints organized migrations toward Missouri. The journey required more than faith. Families needed wagons, food, clothing, animals, money, and cooperation. They were moving hundreds of miles across a country where travel could be slow and physically demanding. One of the most notable was the Kirtland camp. Hundreds traveled together across the country. For the people making that journey, the road west represented both loss and possibility. Behind them was Kirtland. The temple remained standing. Homes remained. Businesses remained. But the community that had once gathered around that center was being scattered. They faced distance, exhaustion, uncertainty, and the difficulty of moving an entire community westward. And yet the migration also demonstrated the movement's ability to reorganize after crisis. The collapse in Kirtland had not destroyed the community's identity. It had forced that identity to travel. But something had changed. The saints were no longer simply gathering in Ohio. The center of gravity was moving. Missouri was becoming increasingly important to the movement's future. Yet the westward journey did not bring an end to their troubles. The saints were moving toward another environment already marked by tension. Relations between Latter-day Saints and other Missourians had been strained by political, religious, economic, and social disagreements. Those tensions would soon become much more serious. Instead, the saints were entering another period of intense conflict. Within Missouri, tensions between Latter-day Saints and their neighbors would soon escalate dramatically. The story that began with a financial collapse in Ohio was now becoming something much larger. The exodus from Kirtland had solved one problem. It had not solved the larger struggle for survival. It had only moved the story somewhere else. Closing reflection. The collapse of Kirtland reveals something larger about movements built around people, belief, and power. A community can grow quickly, but growth does not guarantee stability. When money disappears, trust can disappear with it. When leadership is questioned, allies can become opponents. And when survival is threatened, people make decisions they once believed impossible. Kirtland did not simply fail because of one bad investment or one financial crisis. It became a test of whether a young movement could survive when belief, money, authority, and fear collided. The saints lost the community they had worked to build at the center of their movement. But they did not lose the movement itself. They carried their beliefs, institutions, and identity westward. That is one of history's recurring lessons. A community can lose its place without losing its sense of purpose. History often remembers the buildings that survive, but sometimes the more revealing story is the community that had to leave them behind. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Mode Hub Tales as we uncover the forgotten histories, hidden cultures, and untold stories that shaped our world. Because history doesn't disappear, it waits to be remembered.